Nothing much happened. Well, there was that one time.
All right, welcome to KBLP LLC and Encounters of the Strange Kind. Tonight we're talking about mysterious encounters with evil gnomes, imps, Tommyknockers, and then we're going to discuss a little about the pale crawler. Sounds creepy, don't it? Okay. Since time, basically, time began, there have been tales from all over the world of various magical little people, gnomes, imps, fairies, trolls, goblins, or whatever you want to call them. They are there, etched in the pages of lore, and fairy tales, of course. Yet, what if these creatures are not merely the denizens of myth and legend? What if they are somehow real? Even more spooky, what if some of them are not so benevolent? There are many reports of encounters with such sinister little people, and here are some of the frightening ones. Probably one of the most notorious cases of some sort of imp or demonic gnome attack allegedly occurred in the town of Potterville, California, where a woman known only as Tammy moved with her 3 children to a rural farmhouse just off the river in 2004. Things got odd almost immediately, as Tammy claimed she often felt the heavy sense of being watched, at times almost feeling the eyes upon her. But there was never anyone around during these episodes. It didn't take long for her to realize that this phenomenon happened most often and mostly intensely when she was near the barn, which sat in a secluded corner of the rather large 100-acre property. Indeed, in the coming days, the barn took on quite a sinister air, seeming to emanate a cold chill and spooking the many animals the family owned, including dogs, a cat, chickens, turkeys, and even a duck. Although they tended to wander all over the property, none of these animals would go anywhere near the barn, as if repelled by some unseen force lodged within. Indeed, she observed that none of the neighbors' animals, strays, or wildlife would go near the spooky old barn. Whenever any animals passed it, they would give it a wide berth, and on many occasions would act strangely in its presence, staring at it as if there was something staring back at them. The dogs would sometimes go nuts around the barn, barking and yipping, even though there was no one there. Sometimes there could be heard strange noises coming from within the barn, which sounded like grunts, growls, and squeals. To add a layer to the foreboding, Tammy claimed that she began to notice several of her animals had begun to even go missing without a trace. It was immediately suspected that the menacing barn had something to do with it. Tammy chalked it up all to nerves and perhaps rats or wildlife nesting in the barn. She explained away the missing animals as having just run off or being killed by coyotes, but one frightening encounter would convince her it was something more than that. One evening, Tammy returned from town with her son and parked the car, but as she exited the vehicle and went to get groceries out of the trunk, she claimed she saw a fleeting movement in her periphery of her vision. When she looked up, there was nothing there, and she went back to unloading the groceries. But almost immediately, there was another movement, this time punctuated by an insidious laugh. She would later say, "This time I heard a very freaky, very evil-sounding chuckle. I looked in the direction of the sound, and there, standing about 50 yards from my son, and I was what I can only describe as a gnome. Standing there, she described a humanoid creature about 3 feet tall, which sported a beard and was wearing baggy black pants, a gold-colored shirt, and a red pointy cap. For a moment, it just stood there staring at her and her son with deep-set, dead black eyes as if studying them. But then things took a turn for the sinister. And she would say, "That thing grinned at us, and the creepy grin spread from ear to ear, and its teeth were a gross brown and pointed or jagged. It had a huge nose and large deep-set eyes, though I really couldn't tell the color of them. I never got a closer look and don't know if it was wearing shoes or not, because at that moment I dropped my groceries, grabbed my son, and ran for the house." As soon as Tammy and her son had entered the house and slammed the door behind them, she began frantically telling her daughters what had happened between deep gasps. Somewhere outside, the strange little man was still cackling, and there was movement by the window. The terrified family looked out to see what it was, and as they approached the window, they could see the top of the red pointed cap loom into view, which was especially odd considering this particular window was located around 8 feet above the ground. Tammy closed the blinds, moved her children well away from the window, and waited there breathlessly until the thing finally went away. This would be the only direct sighting of the evil gnome, but Tammy would occasionally hear that same ominous chuckling issuing from the shunned barn. And later on, she would say, "After that night, whenever the dogs barked or howled, we were pretty sure we knew what they were barking at. We were also pretty sure of where our missing poultry had gone. From time to time, we would hear a weird, creepy chuckle and other noises coming from that old barn." And this is not even the end of the story. Tammy and her family would eventually move away, and a new family would move into the house in 2010. This new family, too, immediately noticed there was something weird going on with that decrepit old barn. One evening in the early morning hours, the couple woke to the sound of a raspy, gurgling singing. It chilled them to the bone. When they looked out the window, they could see standing by a small pond on the property a creature standing around 3 feet in height, wearing maroon pants and a baggy yellow shirt with a brown vest and dark waistcoat. The thing was described as having a bushy gray beard and wearing a tall, pointed, reddish hat. The eyes of the being were said to be small and black. Its teeth were discolored, jagged, and sharp, to the point of looking almost broken. The creature seemed to know it was being watched and apparently stared right back at him before snatching one of the expensive koi fish they had stocked the pond with and jamming it to its mouth with glee. The husband allegedly shouted at it to go away, and it actually apparently gave him the finger before running off while laughing. Can you imagine some creepy old little gnome, evil little, flipping you off? I don't know. I think I'd be out there smashing it with something. I don't know. When the area was examined later on, a set of footprints were found that were the size of a child's. Whatever this thing was, apparently really like that pond, because it would be seen there numerous times, always in the early morning hours at around 3 a.m., and often eating the fish that were in it. It also rather amusingly seemed to like playing with the garden gnome decorations that had been set up there. Fed up with the strange intruder, the husband then apparently took away the lawn ornaments and fish, which caused the gnome to one night throw a tantrum, stopping about, shouting out in some garbled, bizarre language. The thing would skirt around the house, banging on the walls and testing locked doors at night, before the family had enough and moved away. The interesting thing about this case is at that time, this family had no idea that the previous family had experienced similar bizarre incidents. What was this creature, and where did it come from? Was it an actual gnome from fairy tale legends, or was it something more demonic in nature? Another fairly well-known case is that of the experience of Chris Fleming, who is a host of TV's Dead, Famous, and Psychic Kids. And he allegedly has been plagued by some sort of demonic imp since his childhood. And it apparently started... It all started in the 70s, when Fleming was just a young child. At the time, he was living at Hoffman Estates, Illinois, and he claims that his house was rather intensely haunted, not only by ghosts, but also what he calls little demons, which he describes as being around 3 feet tall and rather reptilian in appearance, sort of like gremlins, which he says would peer out of the walls, walk out of, into, or fly out of closets and dark corners of the house. He has said of the profound fear they instilled in him as follows. Can you imagine? And he says, "I became so terrified as a child, I slept with the lights on, slept with my back to the wall each night, and had by me a glow-in-the-dark plastic toy sword my mom got me to help feel safe at night. I even ended up placing a last rites cross with candles and holy water beside my bed each night." The manifestation of these diminutive creatures slowed down in later years and stopped altogether. That is, until decades later, when they allegedly began to appear to him again as an adult. In an interview with Dave Schrader on Darkness Radio, He related one particularly harrowing encounter from 2009, when one of the things appeared and he decided to actually try and catch it. According to Fleming, he chased it into a closet, but once there, it simply vanished into thin air. He also described how he came to classify the little monsters as imps, recalling a spirit box session in which he called out to ask what kind of spirits they were haunting his home, and they replied, just imps. Fleming has gone on to give lectures on his experiences, and he theorizes that they are actually lower-level demons, that he believes have the grim work of breaking a family's will, so that more powerful demons can enter and cause mayhem. He has even theorized that similar creatures and little people across the world are also these devils in different guises. Lost my place. I heard a noise. What a surprise, right? They are merely taking different forms and having different names across cultures, with jinn, fairies, and gnomes, all basically devils, that have been terrorizing humans over the millennia. On a last note, Fleming has warned people not to try and investigate or communicate with such creatures, as they are apparently very dangerous and have the ability to spread like a virus. Can you imagine? I can't even. So that kind of makes sense to me, that they're little lower-level demons paving the way for the bigger dudes. So that could well be. Almost kind of like scouts. They're preparing the way. A similar account of one of these mysterious and malicious imps was reported on the site Your Ghost Stories, and allegedly happened in 1975 when the witness was a child. He claims that at the time of the incident, his family had just returned from a road trip to Fresno, California, and were on their way to their home in Salt Lake City, Utah. They had decided to try and take a shortcut, but ending up getting lost out in the desolate desert wastelands of Nevada. Not a good place to be. Excuse me, can you imagine? See, we always talk about, too, on Planet B.O.B. about getting stuck somewhere, so there you go. As they drove about the back roads out there in the middle of nowhere, they apparently came to a tiny little town, squatting out there in this little moonscape of a place where they stopped for the night. That night, the witness says he went to sleep on his stomach as usual with his arm hanging down off the bed. In the middle of the night, his sleep was broken by the sensation of someone yanking and pulling on his arm. In his groggy sleepiness, he at first thought it was his family's dog, even though they had not brought the dog on the trip with them. Nevertheless, the witness was tired and drifted back to sleep, before being woken yet again by a harder, painful tug on his arm. This time he emerged from his daze and was wide awake, looking about the darkened room to see nothing. At that moment, the witness claims his arm was yanked so hard that he was pulled clear off the bed. In a panic, he looked up to see that his aggressor was some sort of vaguely humanoid-shaped green glowing mist, and he explains what happened next. Well, my mom jumped out of bed and ran up behind this thing and screamed, "No!" Then she smacked it with her hand, which made contact with the thing, and you could hear a loud smacking sound. Once this thing was hit, it let go of my arm and let out a high-pitched scream like I have never heard before. It started whirling around like a funnel, then disappeared into the drain that was located in the center of the room. My dad had slept through most of this and hadn't woke him up until he heard the thing scream. I ended up sleeping between my parents the rest of the night with no further incidents. Years later, I was telling the story to someone who had a great deal of experience with the paranormal and supernatural. What he told me was this. The thing I had encountered was an imp. An imp is a low-level demon that feeds upon the souls of young children. They also have the ability to take shape or form and usually appear as children to other children. He also told me that folklore and mythology has some root in fact, and that many of the old fables are still true today as they were hundreds of years ago. He also told me I was very lucky. Many a missing child have ended up in the hands of these demons and have never been found. It's interesting that many such reports indeed seem to revolve around children, with one wondering if maybe the Porterville account also had something to do with the creature being drawn to the 3 young children in the family, and one other such account supposedly happened in the United Kingdom when the witness was just an 8-year-old kid. She claimed she had gone to bed one night but was kept from sleep by a series of taps on her window. Curious, she made her way towards the noise and peered out into the night to see a bizarre entity lurking just beyond the glass, and she would describe it like this. This thing sat on my windowsill on the outside, humanoid, about the same size as a 4-year-old, but its body was almost skeletal. It was so thin it made the thing's head look slightly too big for its body. It had no hair whatsoever but large black-red eyes and a mouth full of lots of sharp little teeth, almost like a cat's. I hid under the covers very scared and didn't get any sleep at all that night. The next day, she says she told her mother, but she wouldn't believe the outlandish story. However, the witness was convinced of what she had seen, and 3 scratch marks on the glass assured her it had all been very real. Bizarrely, at school, she drew a picture of the creature she had seen in her art class, and was shocked to find out that another child had drawn a picture of the exact same entity, independently. She told of her own experience, and it was a perfect match, including the same description of the thing and the 3 scratch marks on the window. Most unsettling of all was what happened many years later. She was 22 years old at the time, living in a bedsit on the 3rd floor of this building. I had a boyfriend called Martin who would come to stay at mine, or I would stay at his from time to time. One day we woke up at mine, switched on the TV, made us coffee. When out of the blue, Martin asked, "Do you have an imp following you?" I replied with something such as, "Been reading too many fairy tales, have we?" Martin then explained what he had seen outside my window. He was woken up by the 3 taps on the window, and had seen this thing. And it matches up to the description to what I had seen all those years ago. When I took a closer look at the window, there were 3 scratches on the outside. Of course, not all reports of trickster imps and gnomes revolve around children, and there is a long tradition of tales involving a type of trickster demon gnome called the Tommyknockers, and we all know that poem, right? Late last night and the night before, Tommyknockers, knocking at my door. Want to go out? Don't know if I can, 'cause I'm so afraid of the Tommyknocker man. I'm sure we've all heard that at one point or another in our lives. So, they have long been said to terrorize miners. These gnomish creatures, typically described as only around 2 or 3 feet tall, are said to lurk within mine shafts, and are so named because legend has it that they will knock on the walls of a mine in a specific pattern before triggering a cave-in. They were also said to cause all manner of mischief, such as stealing food or tools, pushing or pitching from the dark, calling people's names to draw them down deeper into the darkness, but it was the knocking that the miners feared most, and they would often leave out food in a Tommyknocker-infested cave in order to appease them. The origins of these beings ranges from that they are the ghosts of dead miners to inhuman demonic spirits. But wherever they are, it was believed that to hear those knocks meant certain doom, and that the deeper one was to go in the earth, the better their chances of encountering the fiends. This must all sound like a mere myth and legend and fairy tale, but there are many real reports of encountering the Tommyknockers, and they have long been blamed for mysteriously missing miners. These reports and tales are not only from the days of superstitious miners trying to explain the myriad dangers of their profession, and there are more modern reports of the dreaded Tommyknockers as well. This one allegedly occurred in 2016, 2 years ago, when a 38-year-old paranormal investigator named Xavier Hunter and his friend Katie ventured out to a mine located 25 miles outside Las Vegas, Nevada, which was said by locals to be haunted by Tommyknockers. Almost immediately after penetrating into the mine, Hunter claims he and his partner were assailed by the smell of rotting meat, and as they continued down into the bowels of the earth, they began to hear grunts and growls. They would also make the rather odd and unsettling discovery of women's clothing discarded deep in the mine. It was all disturbing enough to cause them to hesitate going any further, but they would go from hesitation to full-on panic when Hunter allegedly saw a dark shape lurking in the shadows near Katie. This was enough to spook them into a full retreat, and Hunter claims that the entity exuded a profound aura of evil that made him physically ill. The whole bizarre excursion was captured on camera, and while reviewing the footage, they found that at one point the entity can actually be seen as what appears to be a miniature hooded figure standing just a few feet tall. And Hunter would explain, "The figure appeared to be hooded. It was completely black. We didn't immediately see it. We saw it after we began to review the video. The odd thing is that around the same time the figure appeared, I began to feel sick and nauseous. I threw up and felt extremely dizzy. We did not record that moment because Katie was trying to help me figure out what was happening. I was shocked, especially after feeling sick right after capturing the figure on tape. I have no idea what it could be. I suppose that a possible explanation could be it was our own shadow. But why would I feel sick and get sick after it appeared? And the presence we both felt in there felt malevolent." Anybody known of any Tommyknockers? Anybody? I have never experienced them myself. Thank God. I don't think I want to. However, another exhibition to a supposedly Tommyknocker haunted cave was, of course, carried out by the crew of Travel Channel's TV Ghost Adventures with Zach Baggins, and I've seen that one. Have anybody else seen it? Their destination was the Phoenix Gold Mine, located in Idaho Springs, Colorado. This was opened in 1871. The mine supposedly has a long history of paranormal phenomena that is often blamed on the Tommyknockers. And there is also a legend of a black magician in the area, as well as an unsolved double murder at the mine, making it seem as good a place as any for a haunting. Excuse me. The team would certainly not be disappointed, as their investigation produced numerous instances of strange phenomena. Right off the bat, one of the crew claims she saw something move in the dark and heard someone calling her name from one of the tunnels, which was confirmed by two other witnesses who also heard it. Indeed, throughout the excursion, there were heard various anomalous noises, such as footsteps, knocks, and banging sounds. And voices are also captured, saying, "Get out," or mumbling other things incomprehensibly. These are not even the spookiest of the phenomena they encounter, and throughout the episode, there are also non-stop instances of weirdness. At one point, Zach is using a Kinect cam and claims he can see a tiny figure of some sort standing in the mine, which appears shortly after hearing a series of mysterious knocks, after which there is a sudden temperature drop that the entire crew can feel. On another occasion, their thermal imaging equipment picks up a bright unidentified heat signature that Zach speculates is possibly a miner's headlamp. And around this time, they pick up strange interference on their equipment. This same interference is heard on another occasion, and this time, two of the tripod legs on one of the cameras are found to be inexplicably bent out of shape. There were also anomalous lights seen over a spirit box, and on another occasion during the investigation, one of the crew members is startled by what he says is something pulling on his pants, among other weirdness. It is all very spooky, but does little to provide any evidence for Tommyknockers or ghosts in the mine, although Zach does come away convinced they're there. Although it is a little unclear just exactly what the Tommyknockers are supposed to be, with their impish ways, typically small stature, and propensity for sowing fear in their victims, they certainly seem to be at least a subspecies of the various malevolent imps, gnomes, and other supernatural little people that seem to pop up to terrorize people from time to time. Indeed, we are really left to wonder what any of these malicious entities are really supposed to be. Are they figments of the imagination, mere descendants of folklore and fairy tales? Are they ghosts, demons, something from some other dimension, or ghoulish goblin universe, or something else altogether? Where do they come from, and why do they go about instilling fear, harassing, and attacking people? We don't know all the answers, and perhaps it is even something we are not meant to know. These beings, part of the machinations of a secret, inscrutable universe we may never comprehend. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Have any of you come across any gnomes or imps or known of any? Heard of any near you or anything like that? Well, we're going to talk about the mysterious gnomes of Wallington Park. It seems to many as though such things as fairies and gnomes surely stand firmly entrenched in the realm of fairy tales and fiction. Of course, like as I've always said from day one of this show, these myths and legends and folklore and so on and so forth come from somewhere. They started somewhere. There is a root of truth in all of these somewhere. After all, how could such odd beings even possibly be real? Yeah, we all know that, right? And to think so would be absurd, wouldn't it? Yet there are countless reports from all over the world from people who can describe seeing what can only be the typical storybook version of these beings, complete with leggings, beards, pointy hats, and one of the more widely known such modern-day accounts was made at a quaint little park. This is in England. Truly, one of the oddest cases of gnome encounters occurred in 1979 in the quiet, verdant Wallington Park, Nottingham, England. Known for its expanses of tree-dotted green and the magnificent Wallington Hall, which was used in the film The Dark Knight Rises. It was here that on October 29th, 1979, a group of 6 school children they all ranged in age from 8 to 10 years old and were out wandering in the late afternoon hours as the sun began to dim as the day began to come to a close by twilight. Realizing that they soon had to get on their way home, they nevertheless had their curiosity piqued when they reportedly came to a fenced-off area of murky, overgrown swampland near the lake that was closed to the public. And of course, being kids, the fence and the sign warning to people to keep out might as well have been an open invitation to come on in. So the children, of course, decided to sneak in to poke around this forbidden treasure. Of course, that's the worst thing you can do. Don't go in. Well, guess what I'm doing? Upon entering, the children would claim they soon heard the chime of a bell, after which they had come across a group of dozens of tiny little men, about half their own height, who had deeply wrinkled faces, sported lush white beards with red tips. On their heads were strange little pointed caps described as looking sort of like nightcaps with baubles on the ends. And their clothing was composed of yellow or green tights and blue shirts. Strangest of all is that the children claim the curious little men drove about in miniature, this is good, bubble-like cars that had no steering wheels, bells instead of horns, and which produced no engine sounds, yet sped around at high speeds and could easily jump over and evade obstacles. According to the children, there are about 30 of these unusual mini-vehicles, with 2 of the gnomes riding in each, laughing joyously and gleefully whizzing around, and even on occasion playfully chasing or making passes at the startled kids. One of the kids would describe them as, "We heard this tinkly little bell. We started running and these little men came out of the bushes. There were about 60 of them in 30 cars like bubble cars. They were half my size and looked old. They had greenish faces with crinkles in them and long white beards with a bit of red on the end. They were laughing in a funny way and driving over swamps near the lake. We were frightened and ran to the gate. I don't think they liked the lights outside because they didn't follow us to the street." The children claimed that they had spent around 15 minutes watching these bizarre figures cavort and drive about the swamp before they finally left for home. The entities were described as being quite cheerful, playful, and not threatening or aggressive. When they told adults of what they had seen, no one would believe them, yet they adamantly insisted it had all been real. The school headmaster would go on to extensively question the kids on what they had seen, and came to the conclusion that they at least believed they were telling the truth. But he would later say, "I think the tape reveals a wide measure of corroboration between the children, as well as the fluency with which they were able to describe the events. I remained skeptical as to the explanation of what they saw, but I am also convinced that the children were describing a real occurrence." Despite wide-ranging skepticism, of course, the tale of the Wallington fairies made headlines in the news at the time, and oddly, more people came forward with their own sightings of the same thing. One such sighting was written of in Janet Bourd's book, Fairies, Real Encounters with Little People, and she writes thusly: "Over 6 years before the Wallington fairies were reported in the media, I had corresponded with Marina Fry of Cornwall, who wrote to me giving details of her own fairy sighting when she was nearly 4 years old, around 1940. One night, she and her older sisters, all sleeping in one bedroom, awoke to hear a buzzing noise. One of the sisters said it sounded like music and bells. Looking out the window, they saw a little man in a tiny red car driving around in circles. He was about 18 inches tall, had a white beard, and a droopy pointed hat, and he just disappeared after a while." Author and researcher and former secretary of the Nottingham-based Fairy Investigation Society, who knew, right? Her name was Marjorie Johnson, also confirmed there had been various other sightings of bubble car driving gnomes in the Wallington Park area, in particular near the lake, and wrote of these in her book, Seeing Fairies. One sighting was made by Mrs. C. George, who sighted the gnomes playing about by the park gates with their cars parked to the side. In still another, a Mrs. Brown claimed to have been guided around the park by the gnomes in a sort of game, wherein they would reward her with a feather at each checkpoint they reached. In another encounter, Jean Dixon claimed she had witnessed gnomes roaming around the park, who seemed eager to show her around their abode. And interesting, Johnson had her own sighting of gnomes in the early 1900s, when she claims that she had spied several tiny men about 3 feet in height, frolicking about dressed as policemen. As recently as 2016, there have been gnome phenomena in the park, such as news reports in the Park Herald that railways in the area were being haunted by the miniature humanoids, to the point that interrupted service on trains running from Nottingham Station to London was being blamed on these little menaces. Chris, I think you inherited some of these. Here's where your freaks came from. Anyway, one witness named Daniel Sedgwick saw a gnome lurking around a train embankment and said, "All of a sudden I caught a glimpse of 5 small hat-wearing creatures tearing down the side of the embankment just after passing through Attenborough." As to whether these creatures pose any threat to people in the area, a professor of gnomic studies, who knew all this was out there? Gnomic studies, named Professor Gregory Landau, put people's minds at ease, telling the newspaper Park Herald, "Gnomes are traditionally benign in attitude and general behavior. To be honest, they consider courtesy and discretion to be amongst the highest attributes of their social code. They are a handful of unconfirmed writings pertaining to a certain suborder. They were castigated from gnomic society, who have a renown for mischief and borderline thuggery. As for gnomes attacking people, as far as he knows, there have never been any documented occurrences. In recent times, there has been a resurgence in interest in the case, when writer and historian Dr. Simon Young expressed interest in reinvigorating the case by bringing together the witnesses again. Young believes that this is a singularly unique case in that so many witnesses saw so many of the creatures, all while their reports remain remarkably consistent across the board. And Young has said, "The experience was interesting in several aspects. There are many instances of children coming face to face with fairies, but I know of none where 6 saw the fade together. So many experiences depend on a single shaky witness or poor chain of custody, and this is not the case with Wallington. What do you think these people were seeing in Wallington Park? Is this just overactive imaginations, or is there some high strangeness going on? If they are indeed real, then what are they? And what is it that draws these entities to this particular place? Whatever the case may be, the Wallington Gnomes case with their odd little vehicles is certainly one of the weirder mass sightings of gnomes out there. What do you think of gnomes? Do you believe in gnomes? You believe in the little people, or imps? I think imps and evil little gnomes, like it is said before, that they're a lower form of a demon, like paving the way for the big guys. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Wow, long day. Wow, that's just totally crazy. But that all those children, and they were so adamant about what they saw. And they were, the stories did not vary. Just crazy stuff. Have another one for you. This is kind of strange. Believe it or not. How about the mysterious little people of Detroit? Really? Do you guys believe in little people out there? Do you believe in gnomes? I think they were drawn to that particular place, Wallington Park, because of the swamp area, and nobody goes there except curious kids like, I would too, probably. Just tell me not to do something, I'll be the first in line, usually. So, is there a reason you think that they appear to kids? Maybe because they're so innocent? I don't know. Because, basically children are innocent. They don't tell lies until they're older, because they learn it from us, of course. Silly us. But, just wondering what you guys think out there. Anyway, throughout the world, from nearly every culture, there are tales of little people. Fairies, gnomes, elves, goblins, all manner of tiny, strange beings inhabit the lore of these places, and in many cases, these creatures are seen as quite real indeed. Occasionally, one can find such stories in the last place one might expect, and here we go. And this gnome or little person has been reported from the area of Detroit, Michigan, for centuries. Who knew? Far from merely a bit of folklore, there have been actual sightings of these beings dating from before European settlement all the way up to the modern day, and the mysterious little people of Detroit are one of the more bizarre stories of such creatures out there. The tale has its origins with the Ottawa tribe, which inhabited the area in and around what would become Detroit, Michigan. And it revolves around the curious entities known as red dwarf. Contrary to the image one may have of Detroit today, this was once an untamed wilderness populated by all manner of spirit folk of Native American legend. And these were among them. The creatures which would come to be known as the red dwarf were said to be indeed mischievous, as many are supposed little folk in other traditions. But they were also protectors of the land, caretakers of the earth. With the coming of the first French settlers, the newcomers to this land brought their own visions of the mythology of their homelands, based on the fairy-like entity known as the Lutin, which has its origins in Normandy. The Lutin were long considered to be mean-spirited trickster spirits, prone to prankish behavior, and seemed a perfect fit for the strange gnomes of the natives. The two traditions became intertwined. The image of these mythical creatures began to change and evolve with European settlement, and they instead began to be seen as not mostly benevolent forest entities, but rather harbingers of doom and destruction, with the sight of one believed to be an almost certain omen of bad things to come. During these days, the red dwarf were described as small child-sized humanoids with red old man faces, glowing eyes, jagged and yellowed rotten teeth, and dressed in worn-down clothes, pointed hats, and fur boots, or sometimes without clothing and covered in a matted reddish-brown hair. Well, this may all seem to be purely the stuff of folklore and legend. Alleged real encounters with these mysterious entities go way back, and they were routinely seen by the native tribes, who considered them to be very much real. One of the earliest such reports from a European starts in 1701, I might add, when the founder of Detroit, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, was having a party on March 10th of that year. During this event, a mysterious fortune teller allegedly appeared with a cat on her shoulder, and when she read his palm, she told him that he was destined to start a great city. But this new colony would be the place of great strife and bloodshed. She also warned him to pay heed to the red dwarf and not to upset it, as this would certainly mean his downfall, which the skeptical leader, of course, scoffed at. When Cadillac finally did found his city, he reportedly went out with his wife one night for a quiet walk and overheard two men complaining about the new city, with one of them saying that he had seen the red dwarf, the little red dwarf, which was a sure sign of bad things to come. At the time, this amused Cadillac, but soon after he reported that a deformed dwarf-like creature, covered in blackish red fur with a beady, fierce red eyes, shambled into view and had crooked, horrendous teeth. Cadillac allegedly bashed the foul creature over the head with a cane and told it to go away, but the gnome just laughed and scampered off. After that, Cadillac was supposedly beset by myriad misfortune, eventually dying alone and penniless. Ooh, don't be hitting a gnome. What is wrong with you? No. Don't be doing it. The creature was spotted multiple times at around the same time, with one frightened farmer claiming to have seen it on the roof of a barn trying to rile up the horses, and another farmer claimed that the thing would appear at night to peer into his windows and steal his chickens. More well known than these scattered sightings was an encounter with one of the little beasts on July 30th, 1763. On this day, 250 British troops had amassed in preparation for a surprise attack on a rebel force made up of a confederacy of Native Americans that had defied British post-war policies in an insurgent uprising known as Pontiac's War, named after one of its fiercest leader, of course, Chief Pontiac. The war itself had devolved into a brutal, ruthless campaign that involved various atrocities such as slaughtering civilians and unceremoniously executing helpless prisoners, and the British were eager to squash the violent rebellion as quickly as possible. On this day, what would end up being called the Battle of Bloody Run, the British forces crept up along a tributary of the Detroit River called Parents Creek, on their way towards Pontiac's encampment, hoping to launch a surprise attack against the chief. But they were surprised to find a large contingent of 400 angry Native American warriors waiting for them and ready to fight. The ensuing battle would drive the British back and was said to be so bloody and vicious the creek ran red with blood, and of course the name changed to Bloody Run. Nearly 60 British soldiers would die in the melee. One Captain James Dalyell, whose corpse was decapitated so his head could be paraded around on a stick. Eyewitnesses, hey Snarkat, of course they are real. Eyewitnesses, including many of the soldiers themselves, would claim they had seen one of the red dwarfs sitting upon the banks of the creek before the battle, as if claiming a front row seat and waiting with glee to witness the carnage. In the aftermath of the fighting, the fearsome little dwarf was then witnessed to frolic and dance among the corpses that littered the ground and wade about in the blood-stained waters of the creek. The creature's demeanor was described as being joyous and elated, as if celebrating the bloodshed. I'm good. Glad you could join me tonight. The reputation of the red dwarf as being a portent of death and disaster continued in the days before the Great Detroit Fire of 1805. Excuse me. Which would burn most of the city to the ground. In the days leading up to the fire, the dreaded red dwarf was reportedly seen numerous times by the citizens, with some even claiming they saw the evil little red man dancing in the flames when disaster struck. Then the creature was seen again in the aftermath of the War of 1812, when the defeated General William Hull reported seeing it peering from the fog on the sidelines and gritting with its disgusting teeth during her surrender of Detroit in 1813. Hull would later be historically executed for military incompetence. Sightings and scary encounters with the red dwarf would continue into later years as well. Yes, I did. Yes. I certainly did. I am just what? We'll talk about that in a little bit. As the sightings and scary encounters with the red dwarf would continue into later years as well. In October of 1872, one woman named Jane Dacey claimed she had just come back to her house from running errands when she encountered what she described as a creature with blood-red eyes, long teeth, and rattling hoofs lurking in a darkened room. The encounter was reportedly so shocking to Dacey, she passed out and ended up bedridden for some time. In 1884, another woman claimed to have been savagely attacked and beaten as she walked along a street at night by a beast that looked like a baboon with a horned head, brilliant restless eyes, and a devilish leer on its face. With the coming of the 20th century, the malevolent little beasts were still up to their tricks. The creature was sighted a few times before the '67 Detroit uprising, which was one of an epidemic of race riots that was sweeping the nation at the time, and was one of the most destructive and violent riots the country has ever seen. One witness at the time described the creature as doing backflips and cartwheels down 12th Street during the police raid of a bar that ignited the whole fiasco. Then in '76, 2 utility workers reported seeing the red dwarf climbing up a utility pole just before one of the worst snowstorms in the city's history rolled through in March of that year. They apparently thought it was a child climbing the pole until it leapt down to the ground, and they could see it was the red dwarf. There are more recent alleged sightings of the red dwarf as well. In '96, a Michigan Believer ran a story about a pair of witnesses who claimed that they had just exited a nightclub when they saw a tiny, hunched-over man wearing what looked like a filthy, tattered old fur coat, flee an attempted car burglary while making a cawing sound. And as recently as 2017, there have been reports of the red dwarf. One commenter on Reddit, called the infamous 99, gave 2 accounts of what appears to be the creature. Yeah, the red dwarf. Yeah, this is in Detroit, Michigan. And these 2 stories came from 2 people who knew nothing of the other. My great aunt says when she was little, she's seen a gnome on several occasions. It would stare at her and followed her around. The last time she saw it, it was at a funeral home, and it wanted her to go into a cellar, and she felt it was evil. When she told me and my sister this story as an old woman, she looked disturbed and says she has carried a cross ever since. My sister and I were really young, so we didn't really get many details. One regret I have is not finding out more. My family believed her, at least believed she had thought she'd seen it. No one is alive that would have any more information about her sighting or encounter. The next person to tell me a related account was my close friend's older sister. She said she was chased by an evil little creature at her bus stop. She described it as a gnome, and my friends would clown on her about it. But now that I'm older and more mature, I'm very much interested in the supernatural. I regret not listening to her. She had a hard time even talking about it. She was very small, about 8 years old. It had white fur and a pointy red hat. Is there anything to these sorts of tales? Or is this all myth and urban legend? Who'd have thought in Detroit, Michigan, right? After all, cultures around the world have their own version of mysterious elves, gnomes, and other trickster spirits in their lore. So is this perhaps just the Detroit region's own unique little people myth? Or do these stories have something to them? And if the red dwarf is real at all, then what could it be? It's interesting to note the appearance of the notorious red dwarf in Detroit has historically been very often cited before or during tragedies or disasters, which is keeping in with the reports of other ominous entities that serve as portents of doom, such as the well-known Mothman of Point Pleasant, Virginia. Could the red dwarf be similar, or even the same one in a different form? Related to this line of questioning is just why the red dwarf should go from beneficial nature spirit protector it was traditionally seen as, to the seemingly evil creature depicted upon the arrival of the Europeans. But if the beings are at all real, this could be because they simply did not take kindly to the outsiders coming into their land. It could also be we have misunderstood them, and that they are not causing the disasters, but trying to warn us. And in this sense, they could still be considered protectors or guardians of the land. Regardless of whether the red dwarf is actually real or not, the city of Detroit has adopted it as sort of their mascot. Oh, we're going to get to that. Yes, because I live right on Lake Erie. I live right on Lake Erie. I'm not kidding you. Lake Erie is 5 minutes from my house. 5 minutes. Driving. But I could walk it if I wanted to. I think maybe we'll do that next week, Snarket. What do you think? The Great Lakes Mysteries. Yes, definitely. I promise I will do that next week for you. How about that? Snarket wanted of Oz would like to hear more. Oh, you're jealous? Oh, no, don't be. Honestly. Wants to hear more about the Great Lakes Mysteries, especially Lake Erie. And I think I'll do that next week before we get into the last 2 weeks or so with Halloween stuff. But there's some really bizarre stories of the Great Lakes. And, oh, thank you. Thank you. And we'll get into that. I will get into that, definitely. So Detroit has adopted this red dwarf as sort of its mascot. And there's been a yearly parade called the March of the Red Dwarf, in which costume revelers ceremoniously chase the red dwarf out of the city and conclude with a burning effigy of the creature, which will banish the imp from the city for another year. There is also a brewery in the city that produces Detroit Dwarf Lager. This is what it is called. Detroit Dwarf Lager. In honor of the red dwarf. Okay, and a wine importer in the city has its own Nan Rouge Red wine. That's red dwarf wine, by the way. The character also pops up in popular culture in Detroit from time to time. Even if the red dwarf was never real, it seems to maintain a presence in the city to some degree. What do you think of that? Okay. It's like an ale, a beer. Even Alaska has its little people. And they have evil gnomes in Central and South America. There's a ton of stuff that we could be going on about. I'm saying there is just so many stories and stuff of little people everywhere. It's crazy. That we don't hear about. I never knew about Detroit and their little red dwarf. Never, ever. I don't know if Laura, you heard about it. You might have. Just really really little spooky, actually. Yeah, just kind of I like to talk a little more about Tommyknockers. Because Tommyknockers are just in the mines. Have any of you, yep, known any Tommyknockers? Have you ever heard them? Of course, we all know the famous Stephen King novel, The Tommyknockers. Yes, Nan. Nan Rouge, Red Dwarf. That's exactly the translation of that. So, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to come back and talk about the pale crawler. This is and the mantis man, creepy, scary. Yeah, this is creepy. So anyway, we'll be right back. Take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of Encounters of the Strange Kind. Okay, welcome back to KBLP and Encounters of the Strange. Cool, glad you did. Me too. I love their music. Okay, we're going to talk about accounts of the pale crawlers. Yeah, they're as creepy as they sound, believe me. The pale crawlers. Oh, that even sounds creepy, doesn't it? And of course, among the many strange encounters in the world of the paranormal, there are those that serve to be particularly baffling. These are cases that kind of hover up beyond our ability to really classify them. Are they ghosts, mysterious animals, aliens, or what are they? No answers are clear in such accounts, and they lurk out there in the periphery, like on the fringe. Among these bizarre accounts are tales from all over of what appear to be some sort of thin, pale beings, often hunched over, crouching, and crawling. They have become collectively known as pale crawlers, and they are every bit as creepy as you might imagine. Probably one of the most well-known cases of these odd entities is that of what has come to be called the Fresno night crawlers. The first account of these truly bizarre and unidentifiable creatures surfaced in the 1990s. Yes, they crawl in the mist. They look totally bizarre, don't they? I don't know. What would you classify that as? And this is in the 1990s. A video came forward showing something very strange lurking about in Fresno, California. There was a family who were concerned about trespassers on their property, and their dogs had begun to bark out into the darkness every night. And this prompted them to install a security camera outside, of course, facing the front lawn. The next morning, after they set up the camera, they were in for quite a shock, as there in the video was a pair of pale beings a few feet in height, no discernible arms and two long, spindly, almost stick-like legs that appeared to bend backwards. There seems to be some sort of fabric flapping around their legs, drawing many comparisons to a pair of disembodied walking bands. In the footage, the creatures smoothly and fluidly move across the front lawn and out of view. And you can go on Google or YouTube and see a picture. You can see the footage there. Go to YouTube. The quality isn't great, but the general shape and their odd way of moving were creepy enough to have the family contact the police. Before long, the media got a hold of it, of course, and the Fresno night crawlers became a hot topic. They are thought by many to be a hoax. Others say this footage has captured something truly otherworldly. And the footage was subjected to a detailed analysis on the Sci-Fi Channel. Fact or fake, by the way. It showed the footage seemed to be genuine, and they were unable to reproduce by faking the video. So there you go. Following on the heels of this video, there was another one, this time taken over in California's Yosemite National Park in March of 2011. And that's not that, that's recent. That's not like it's years ago. In this case, surveillance cameras had been set up by park officials for the purpose of identifying intruders who had been vandalizing an area of the park. And again, ashamed to have been caught on tape, anything but human. There was a pair of spindly white entities loping across the frame on a hillside, one much smaller than the other, and both with what appears to be some sort of webbing connected from the knees to the upper body. They appear to be very similar. It is unknown if the Fresno creatures and the ones from Yosemite are related or not. There have been theories ranging from this and that it was all a hoax to that they are native spirits from lore, ghosts, or even aliens. No one really knows. Something similar to these entities was cited in January of 2004 in a case documented by researcher Albert Rosales. The sighting happened in Manchester, Dearborn County, Indiana. Not that far. when a young man was driving along a remote rural road in the area. As the witness rounded a bend, his headlights illuminated a tall, frail-looking pale being crouched over a puddle of water. As the witness passed the thing, he looked back and could make out that it moved in a disjointed, odd manner and had, according to him, protruding joints that buckled out. These things are creepy looking. They are not right. Excuse me, definitely not right. As he watched the thing flickering in the red light cast by his taillights, the crouched, bone-white creature stood to a height of an estimated 6 to 7 inches tall and began to walk in a strange manner. As he watched, there was apparently another car that came along and seemed to swerve to avoid the thing before stopping. The witness would talk to the elderly couple in the car, and they would confirm having seen the same thing. And they said that was no human being, that was no man. They were also spooked that they decided to drive out of there in a close procession together. Indiana has produced some other similarly odd reports as well. In one case from the winter of 2016, the witness was out feeding goats on a farm in Indiana around 8 p.m. When she finished, she started walking back, and this is what she said. After I had finished, I began to walk back. I had crossed one field and was about halfway through the narrow path when I started to hear rustling in the underbrush. All I had with me was a little flashlight that shone about 10 feet in front of me. I was almost to the end of the path when I spotted something. It was on all fours with a bony frame, elongated limbs, and pale skin. While the first part of that description sounds pretty generic, it did seem to have a long and highly flexible neck. Not long after I noticed it, it noticed me and bolted down the path. It ran, almost scuttling, into the second field. This field had a small hill in the center, and this thing fled and disappeared over one side. I ran as fast as I could around the other side of the small hill and zigzagged back to my house, where I quickly locked all my doors. This thing was terrifying, but it seemed watchful for now. In another account from Indiana, documented in the National Cryptid Society database, and who knew that existed also? The National Cryptid Society database. So there you go. There's a case from Michigan City, Indiana from 2012. In the middle of a lightning storm, to add some atmosphere, of course. The witness claims she had been staying at the beach house of a friend by Lake Michigan. There you go. And that there had been a lightning storm at the time. At around 2 a.m., some of them went outside to smoke and watch the lightning, and that's when they noticed the beam of a flashlight scanning the tall grass by the shore, as if searching for something. Thinking this to be a bit odd, the group of friends watched on and saw the beam had captured an elongated, grayish humanoid-looking creature stretched out on the beach, and the witnesses would say, "The light sweeps by something in the grass, then it shines back onto it. What was illuminated was very strange. It appeared to be a naked guy crawling around on the grass. Although it had elongated arms and legs, it was moving kind of fast, crunched over. It only lasted a few seconds, long enough for all of us to see it. And then afterwards, the thing ran off. The flashlight shines directly at us. It stayed pointing at us until it went out after a few seconds. Creepy." So we're all like, what the hell was that? We asked each other what each other saw. And we all saw a weird, stretched-out naked guy. The only explanation is it could have been was a drunk, gangly naked guy. But I don't think so. It looked abnormally stretched. The light pointed at us, and it freaked everyone out. It could have been maybe about 7 feet tall. It looked like something from a Marilyn Manson music video. I wanted to go down there. I wanted to see if we could find it, but no one would go. They were all too creeped out. What on earth was that outlandish thing they saw? What was with that? What was with the flashlight, and why did it train itself on the observers? There have been a few sightings of something similar and equally baffling around the town of Effingham, in the state of Illinois. The National Cryptid Society, who knew? I did not know. But they dated this 2010 and concerns a witness known as Jade. The witness was allegedly out one night, headed for the supposedly haunted Casbar Cemetery out in the deep woods outside of Effingham, along with two friends. When they were out in the countryside at around 1 a.m., something very curious congealed out of the night, and they would say, "I saw something with yellow glowing eyes off the side of the country road, just past the ditch and the headlights. Too short to be a deer, too big to be a possum or raccoon." As we get closer, it gets clearer, and I realize what I'm looking at is skinny, hairless, gray, human-like, but definitely not human. It was crouched down. Its arms were incredibly long and looked like it could have been 7 foot tall or bigger standing. I could feel myself get cold and my heart race, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Complete shock and terror set in, and I can't make a sound. I'm just staring at it. By that time, we are right in front of it, passing it, and it just watches us drive by. It slinks into the dark. Then we all literally started screaming, literally freaking the hell out. I was convinced it was a demon for months, but still doubted myself even seeing it. We didn't even make it to the Casbar that night. We went straight home and couldn't sleep. They thought they saw a ghoul or an entity that lurks around feeding on the dead. And, of course, one would say, they feed on the freshly dead and normally stay close to cemeteries to be close to food. They have been known to show themselves to humans when trying to get close to them to eat them in times where fresh deceased bodies are scarce. I went to images of them and could only find illustrations, but they look exactly like what I saw that night. Everything I was reading was falling perfectly in place. I couldn't explain it away. Also in the state of Illinois is a case from the town of Rossville in 2010. Now this is not that old. We're not talking like 1960s, 50s, or 40s. This is just 2010, 8 years ago. And the setting was at a cemetery at a time I was just after sunset. The witness and a friend were walking down the main lane through the cemetery when something fairly weird scuttled out into the night. Excuse me. And they would say, something came running from the gate and passed us on our left. My friend had laughed and asked if I had heard that. I stopped walking and responded that no, but I had seen it. As the thing had passed between the headstones, I caught a look. Looked like a pale, emaciated humanoid that was running on all fours. It had no hair, and I did not get a good look at the face. It was moving faster than any person running on hands and feet should have. My friend and I stayed frozen and waited for another friend to come and get us because we were too scared to move. It continued to circle us as we could hear it moving around. It never seemed threatening. If anything, it seemed curious. But who knows? I know it was not a coyote or a stray dog. I did see the head. It did not have a muzzle, no tail. It definitely didn't have fur. It had a pale, almost bluish skin. I could make out the ribs from where I was standing. There is, like in the horror groups on Facebook, there are pictures of him, but you don't realize what you're looking at. And it's a pale crawler. Other locations have had sightings as well. Ballard County in western Kentucky. As the witness was driving along the back roads on a gravel road one night around 2 a.m., he saw something in his headlights that startled him to the core. It was something white and vaguely human crawling in the ditch. As we passed, I hit the brakes thinking it was a person who needed help. "Are you crazy? Don't freaking stop," his passenger screamed. I looked in the mirror and saw it was standing up. It was still in the ditch. It was as tall as the stop sign next to it. It took a step towards us. I hit the gas. As we drove away, I saw in the mirror it dropped to all fours and was crawling after us. I didn't start pulling away till I got up to about 40. No matter how close I was to it, I never got a good look at it. It was funny, like it was constantly out of focus. Something about it makes me think it was a male. When it crawled, it moved like a lizard, hands and feet flat on the ground, elbows and knees up and out, body wiggling side to side. I've taken many a midnight cruise along those roads, but I've never had the nerve to go near that farm road again. Such accounts seem to lie beyond any easy classification. Are we here dealing with some sort of cryptid, ghosts, aliens, interdimensional interlopers, or what? I don't believe it's all just hoaxes and information. There's too many people that have seen this. They seem to be far beyond normal reports of cryptids or ghostly phenomena, leaving us to ponder just what might be going on. These truly bizarre entities are not anything anyone would want to encounter slithering down a darkened road at night in the middle of nowhere. And me, when I come home from work, I go down 3 roads, dark roads, no lights, there's no street lights, it's like woods. And I'm just waiting for something to come out of there. There are plenty, they're also called fog crawlers. That's something else. That's a fog crawler. Now that's kind of creepy. It's been mutated by the... Whoa, great. That's going to be for another day. Yeah, no. Really creepy. Oh, excuse me. Goodness. Almost bedtime for me. We're going to go into the... talk a little bit about the mantis man, too. That's going to be a little weird. Has anybody ever seen anything like this? Like the creepy crawlers or the mantis man? No? Yes? Okay. Giant creepy crawlies, I might add. Not just creepy crawlies, but giant ones to boot. Okay. There are few than more people, of course there are, who find insects, spiders, and bugs of all type to be unsettling and revolting at worst. Ugh. They seem to prickle at some innate primeval part of our brain that says run, and they have become a staple of all manner of horror stories. There are reports out there that seem to take things to a new level, though, with witnesses coming across such creeping, skittering denizens from beyond our understanding, that are not only mysterious, but are also far beyond the sizes of anything we know. And this report appeared in Oh, I apologize. I'm sitting here yawning. This report appeared on the site Cryptozoology News in 2013. It was given by a 32-year-old doctor named Marco Giussati, who was on a flight from Rome to Boston at the time. It was a rather uneventful flight, and it was 30,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. It's probably the last place you would expect to have a run-in with some sort of mysterious creature, right? Oh, ask William Shatner. Oh, anyway, I had to throw that in there. But things got interesting when Giussati says he was overcome by a sudden and inexplicable sense of overwhelming dread and a feeling of nauseousness. He had first thought this was some kind of abrupt panic attack, but looking around, he could see others sitting nearby seemed to be suffering from the same thing, and things would get intense quickly. Giussati claims he heard a loud jolting thud on the window of the plane, which some others also clearly heard. And when he looked down to the sky, he saw something from a horror film. There, fastened to the outside of the plane, was allegedly some sort of immense, beetle-like insect with a metallic green body and large segmented eyes, and was somehow able to maintain its grip on the aircraft. And he would say, it had attached to the window with a claw-like structure on its big black legs. There were hairs and hooks and some sort of adhesive pad that apparently helped the animal stay on the plane. It unfastened its legs from the glass, and his green metallic body opened up. 2 wings came out. I should say more like rolled out, like a rug. They were translucent, and I could see it full of red veins. It looked like tree branches or a leaf. The thing glided about for a bit, then it started flapping its wings slowly. It was incredibly slow, not like a regular insect, where you can't even see the shape of the wings. And he stared right at us, looked like a red flashlight. After a few moments, the bizarre creature was gone. It would turn out that 10 other people had seen it, and one even claimed to have taken a photo of it, although it is unclear what happened to it. Giussatti claims to have exchanged email addresses with the passengers who took it, but he would say, "I exchanged emails with one of them that claimed to have taken a picture," but he never replied. I never liked the way email addresses work. You get a letter wrong and that's it. Or maybe he just doesn't want to send it to me. I know it's hard to believe, but I know what I saw. I have never seen anything like this. A big, big insect out of this world. This is certainly one of the most bizarre accounts that have been around a while and leaves questions swirling about. First of all, how big was it? There was no really precise size of it, estimate, although they said it was supposedly gigantic. What could it possibly be, and why was it so high up in the atmosphere? How could it manage to match speeds and course with and attach itself to an airliner going at full speed? What caused that feeling of panic, dread, and nausea among some of the passengers? Is this a real insect or an interdimensional creature? The evidence we left is testimony and a sketch of the creature. It seems so outlandish that although the witness is described as being intelligent and reliable, but did it really happen? Perhaps even creepier are the various reports of giant spiders lurking within the jungles of the African interior. Oh, great. We should go to Australia, right? Apparently they have giant jumping ones. But okay. But these are lurking within the thick, nearly impenetrable jungles of the most remote parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but also Uganda and the Central African Republic. They are said to be enormous ground-dwelling spiders, which the natives of the region referred as chibafufi. 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 That's it. Giant spider is what it translates to. The chabufi are said to be reminiscent of a tarantula in both form and color, with adults exhibiting a dark brown coloration, but the real difference is the size. The Congolese giant spiders are said to be between an unsettling 4 to 6 feet. Are you freaking kidding me? Not enough rain in this world. I don't have a shoe big enough. This shockingly immense size allows them to allegedly prey on a variety of small animals, you think? Including birds, antelopes, monkeys, and various reptiles, which they trap in an elaborate pattern of webs. Can you imagine the webs on this thing? And they devour after pouncing forth from a shallow depression camouflaged by leaves, in a manner similar to trapdoor spiders. Reports from missionaries in the region and natives had long suggested the spiders are even known to kill humans on occasion, and that their venom is extremely potent, which is illustrated by old reports from the jungle-choked African interior porters or tribesmen succumbing to giant spider bites. Although explorers, missionaries, and natives had long told of seeing these massive spiders, perhaps the report that most thrust Chabafofi into the spotlight was a sighting made by Reginald and Marguerite Lloyd, which was chronicled by cryptozoologist George Eberhardt. According to the account, the Lloyds were exploring a remote region of what was then known as the Belgian Congo. Excuse me. When they spied a dark shape skitter out from the underbrush and across the road in front of them. They thought it was merely some sort of cat, monkey, or common jungle animal, and stopped their truck so they wouldn't hit it. It was then that it became apparent to the horrified explorers that the creature was in fact a gigantic spider with a purported leg span of at least 4 or 5 feet. Before either of the eyewitnesses could get a camera or overcome their shock, the spider already scampered into the thick bush on the other side. Mrs. Lloyd was so upset at the incident, she demanded they return to their home in Rhodesia at once. Another report of giant spiders comes from Uganda during the 1890s, where an English missionary named Arthur Symes was exploring along the shores of Lake Nyasa. As Symes and company were trekking along, several of his porters became hopelessly entangled in a network of webbing that hugged the ground and too strong to break with any means they possessed. It was not long before at least 2 giant spiders with leg spans about 4 feet pounced upon the ensnared men and bit them before they were able to drive them off with his pistol. Moments after being bitten, the porters were reported to have become feverish and delirious. Their extremities swelled up and death followed. There are also accounts of giant spider sightings from several other expeditions in search of yet another cryptid, the saurian, dinosaur-like Mokel-Membi. Such expeditions often heard stories from natives about the Chabafofi, or even saw the spiders themselves. So, it soon became apparent not only did the natives know of them and see the giant spiders on a fairly regular basis, but they had a good deal of knowledge about their behavior and life cycle. Can you imagine? I can't even. Huh. That is freaking crazy. Besides the fact no other such spider on a vast magnitude has ever been documented, there seems to be no reason to assume this is not true. Oh, great. Okay. A lot of these places, the natives and people who live there know of these. That doesn't mean they don't exist. They have just not they're not formally recognized by outsiders or science. And, keep in mind that many new species were discovered, including ones that at one time were even considered fantastical or absurd, such as the gorilla or panda, and native accounts of the creatures which they take as fact. So we should not dismiss it so lightly. Do more legs equal more frightening? If so, what are we to make of the numerous reports of giant centipedes said to prowl the remote corners of the earth? In the uncharted wilds of the Amazon, travelers have come back from the wild frontiers of the rainforests with tales of horrifying centipedes, oh dear God, measuring up to 5 feet long. 5-foot centipedes. They slither through the underbrush. These creatures are said to have venom that can quickly kill a full-grown man, and is so powerful as to completely melt and dissolve flesh. Some reports have even made mention of the creatures projecting their potent poison over a distance. Okay. Not cool. Another account of a massive cryptid centipede was first mentioned in an article in the August 2009 issue of BBC Wildlife magazine, in which naturalist Jeremy Holden describes a truly and terrifying creature. While exploring the remote jungles of Sumatra, Holden visited an isolated vision in the western part, where the locals told him of a type of centipede which was said to be around, a foot in length, with a thick body, green in color, and wicked, unbearably painful bite. This mysterious centipede they called the Yupa was said to lurk in trees and have the unsettling ability to let out a high-pitched screech that was described like that of a cat. These stories of a shrieking or yowling giant centipede were not taken very seriously by Holden, but he would soon have first-hand encounter with one, so there you go. A few weeks after hearing of these strange creatures, he claimed he had been walking along a jungle trail when he heard a sudden booming cat-like scream pierce down from the trees above. It was followed by a strange rattling sound. The guides confirmed this was indeed the cry of a Yupa, but they couldn't find it up in the trees. On another occasion, Holden was yet again traversing the thick jungle. He heard an unidentifiable cry from the canopy once again. It sounded remarkably similar to the one he heard before. However, one of Holden's companions on this trip was an avid bird watcher. But moving over to North America, we make another addition to the list of giant centipedes. The Ozark Mountains, guys. In particular, the areas of Gainesville, Stone County, Taney County in Missouri, and Marion County in Arkansas. They have claimed to have been claimed to be the lair of some kind of mysterious, enormous centipede since at least the mid-19th century. Described as being up to 18 inches in length. That's a foot and a half, mind you. The Ozark giant centipede was reported from the region all the time by frightened locals and visitors, who sometimes described the creature's odd habit of wrapping its massive body around its young. Oh, dear God. In one case in 1860, a specimen measuring 18 inches long was captured at Jimmy's Creek, in Arkansas, and its body preserved in alcohol. Another case tells of a young boy who was attacked by one of the giant centipedes and bitten, after which the flesh of his leg literally rotted off, crippling him for the rest of his life. Okay. Another case tells of a boy out hunting with his brother when he was chased by an immense centipede several feet in length, who seemed intent on attacking the boy until his brother killed it. There are even larger mystery centipedes reported from the Ozarks from time to time. Great, that's wonderful. No, giant spiders, giant centipedes, no, not going there. Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Let's see. Even larger ones have been reported, though. A group of campers in Nagano Prefecture claimed to have heard an odd rustling one evening coming from one of their tents. Upon closer inspection, the noise turned out to be from a monstrous centipede to have been around 2 feet in length. The creature was apparently startled and made a quick escape. Thank God nobody got bitten or anything. These are not anything any of us would want to run into, believe me. But even more bizarre are reports of what actually seems to be some sort of insectoid humanoid in the area of New Jersey. Okay, there you go. Sightings began in the early 2000s when a witness named Joe Parenti was fishing along the river. He suddenly felt some sort of electrical tingling flow through him, and his hair stand up on end. When he whipped around to look, he claims to have seen lurking in the nearby brush a 7-foot-tall entity with dark green skin and a head that looked like that of a praying mantis, which had prominent mandibles and seemed to be in the process of chewing something. Okay, the mantis man. Apparently the two stared at each other, and then Joe began to get the distinct feeling his mind was somehow being probed. There was something crawling around in his head who was not supposed to be there. He began to back away slowly, and that was when the mantis man would unfurl a pair of immense wings, after which it was enveloped in a sudden creeping mist and vanished in 2006. Vanished without a trace. In 2006, there was another report of a similar creature from Paul Jacks, who had also been fishing along this Muscatonican River. This is in New Jersey. And the witness would describe the sighting on the site, phantoms and monsters like this. Humanoid, tall, 6 foot at least, no reference point, but I said 6'6" to 7 foot. Moving away from me back up the bank. And he was chest high in the river. I am chest high in the river. The first thing I see was the grasshopper thigh, but bending forward like a human, then the whole form. He is looking at me over his shoulder, moving up the bank, astonished, amazed. What, that I am in the water in a strong current, that I can see him? But we lock eyes, and this creature is astonished. I get the sense he can't believe I'm in the water, that he can't believe I've seen him, that I'm not excited at all, or a combination thereof.
I still don't know, just astonishment, and he is actually trying to get away from me and the water. Triangular head, huge, slanted black eyes, just like a praying mantis. Its whole body was gangly, knobby, but you could still sense it was powerful. It was definitely humanoid, despite the mantis qualities. The creature in this case seemed to simply go into thin air as a horrified witness looked on. Yet another sighting comes from Hackettstown, New Jersey, along the same river. The witness claimed to have encountered the same entity in 2011 as he drove along a place called Newburgh Road. And he would say, "As I drove near the bridge over the river, I noticed to my left something I thought was a fisherman standing in the river. I slowed the car and looked closer. It wasn't a person, and it was transparent-like with a weird shape. It moved slowly towards the bank and into the trees. I drove further so I could see it coming out of the trees. That's the last I saw of it. It was tall, 8 foot or so, and had long, thin arms hanging off. The color was pale brown, but I could see through it. The head was small compared to the body. There have been other sightings of something weird lurking in the area as well. And it all leaves one to wonder just what in the world it could be. It seems unlikely that there is a real Bigfoot-sized praying mantis that has been lurking in New Jersey undiscovered. Maybe, maybe not, right? Are we dealing with a hoax or something very odd indeed? Perhaps something interdimensional in nature, or even an alien, according to some. Whatever it is, the Mantis Man of New Jersey still gets mentioned in reports on various supernatural forums from time to time. Are we looking at anything possibly cryptozoological in nature? Are these undiscovered creepy crawlies have simply eluded us, or are they something else? No matter the origins of these creatures described, such accounts are perhaps enough to cause the skin to crawl for many. They manage to worm their way into some primitive part of our psyche that tells us these creatures are something to be avoided, especially if they are as large as they are described. Whether or not they are real, the very idea that some of them skitter and scamper about in the periphery of our vision and our knowledge is something to be enough to be disturbing. And they are certainly not anything one wants to come across while out in the wilds. So what do you think of the Mantis Man? Just wondering. There's many reports along that river in New Jersey about this Mantis Man. This is not something just one person has seen. Many, many accounts. And you can go to some of these sites and check them out. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's show about the evil gnomes, imps, and Tommyknockers, and the pale crawler and the giant crawlers. Good Lord. Can you imagine coming across that at night? And what do you think they are? I think, those pale crawlers, I think they're interdimensional. I really do. Because of their form and because of how they move. The giant creatures, God, I don't know. That just creeps me out. Michelle and I have talked about that for a while, about Australia, and they can keep that stuff there. Thank you. But, and Tommyknockers, I believe Tommyknockers exist. Miners have sworn by them for years. If they hear them knocking, get out, because there's going to be a cave-in. So, later on, I'm not sure, I think Ike Diaz will be on. Let's give you a rundown. With the Dam, so tune into that, say hey. Tomorrow, join me, after The Walking Dead, of course. We're going to do American Horror Stories, so tune in for that. But it will be after The Walking Dead, of course. Yay, Walking Dead. And I like to say, R.I.P. Scott Wilson. Oh my God, we're going to miss you. For those of you who don't know, Scott Wilson played Herschel on The Walking Dead. He was we always look forward to seeing him every week. He was a phenomenal actor, and we are going to miss you. so much. So thank you, Scott Wilson, for all you've given us. Rest in peace. Okay. Yes. Horrible, horrible news. He passed away today. So terrible. Oh, is that just really strange that the season premiere starts tomorrow? Weird. Kind of gave me the creeps a little bit, really, but definitely going to miss the man. He was a great actor, and I'm so glad he was able to give us Herschel on The Walking Dead. So anyway, then of course we're all going to be glued to the TVs with that, and then of course join me for American Horror Story. Oh, this season just keeps getting better and better, guys. Monday, join Gary Martinez with Sports Talk. Okay, but talk about the Broncos, talk about injury stats, and we'll see how our picks did this week. I'm supposing I'll have to move DWD to Tuesday nights. As again, my Thursday night has been compromised. So, look forward to that on Tuesday. I'm going to be doing the Power Metal Part 2, since we haven't been able to get on with that yet. So join me for that on Tuesday. Wednesday is, of course, going to be The Walking Dead first show of the season with Michelle Auger and myself, and I hope Rick Moylan, who is also going to be a co-host. So on Wednesday, join us for that. We're going to talk about the first episode of the season. Yay! On Thursday, join Desiree for Chain. Tune in for that. After that is Lolita's Jam. She plays hip-hop, new artist, underground music, so check her out. Friday, we hope to have our biggest freak back, Chris Stevens, with Freaks in the Basement. Saturday, join me for Encounters of the Strange Kind. So that's kind of a rundown. Shout out to True Horror Junkies, Horror 3-Ring Circus, Walking Dead Freak Show. Join that. They had just such a wonderful scavenger hunt. I got so lost in that. I didn't know what to do first or last, Michelle. And I truly apologize. I tried to get some of that done. I'm just like, it was almost too much, overwhelming for me between working and doing this stuff. Of course, I took kind of never mind, we'll talk about that later. But I was just kind of overwhelmed. Like, I gotta get this is done. You guys had so much on there. It was amazing, but it was like, whoa. Once I got behind, I just could not catch up for the life of me. And I'm so sad that I didn't post what I had on there. So I apologize, Michelle. So check out Walking Dead Freak Show. Very cool. Jason Boyce and Michelle Auger on there. I'm going to miss those scavenger hunts, seriously. Okay, shout out to Art of Darkness, King Barker and Beyond, Typhoid Marys. She has graciously allowed me to put DWD on there, so thank you for that. Shout out to Michelle, of course, for all her hard work. Shout out to KBLP, LLC, and YouTube 4, which you can check the episodes of our podcast on YouTube 4. You need to know or catch up on some of the podcast, go to KBLP, LLC, catch up on things. We post our links there. And you can get a hold of us from there. Message me if you want to hear about something. Snarkette, I've got your request for the I kind of did that on Evil Legends versus Evil Myths. I kind of did that a way back. But, we'll do something like that again soon. Yes, cryptids in Michigan. Yes. You're so awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to be talking about Great Lakes mysteries soon. So, of course, Halloween's coming up, so lots of stuff going on. Let's see, who else do I want to shout out to? Let me think. Let me think. I want to make sure I cover bases. Oh, of course, Survival Wolves with Mike Rono. What am I thinking? And that's on Facebook. If you go to see the page, go to the real one, which has 2,000 plus members. There is a copycat one out there, and it's got like a little over 500 members. So go to the real one, okay? Conflicted with Julie Kinney, and I hope to have her on Planet B period. Oh, period B period, very soon again. Love having her. So check her site out, Conflicted. It's like what if scenarios. So go check it out. Very cool, very cool. I just don't have enough hours in a day anymore to do everything, to see everybody. But I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I have a few more songs for you. Again, we did Evil Gnomes, Imps, and Tommyknockers, and then the Pale Crawler, and of course the Giant Crawlers and Mantis Man. So let me know what you thought about it, okay? Okay, everybody, thank you for listening. Have a great night. Thank you, Snarkhead of Oz, for joining me tonight. Good to see you. Good to see you, dear. So I'm going to say goodnight. I got to get up early for work in the morning. So have a great night. Peace out, y'all.
Sing along in this haunted lullaby. I'm not the one who's so far away when I feel the snake bite and tear my veins. Never did I wanna be here again, and I don't remember why I came.